You might have like if you're still making Star Wars, that guy who used to do the sound editing, Ben Burt, he would like come in your room and like, that's an interesting sound, and record the sound of your washing machine. Right.
Yeah, well, it's not actually in my room, and it's behind the door, but that's still pretty loud, I guess.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Because he would go out on the hunt. I think they call it the Foley artist that goes to like in the hunt of
Oh
strange
yeah,
sounds.
yeah, and I love that sort of thing. I'm a big sound guy, so all that
Oh,
stuff was fascinating to me as a kid when I would on all the stuff about how they used to make the old radio shows and the sound effects and stuff. I've always loved all that.
yeah. So like some of those documentaries on the Star Wars DVDs for the prequels, just the stuff when Ben Burt comes on, and all the stuff like how he did all the sound effects for like the lightsaber and all those things. Very interesting. So I'm going to try and read through this to make it bigger for everybody. I'm going to maximize it for a bit. Um, so I'm going to try and do my best in reading this out. So let's try this version, make it a bit bigger. So Kappatoo speaks to Simon via the TV and advises him of what happened the following evening. And with Sigmasix still on the loose, he should not come back. Yeah, that bit confused me a little bit. What happened the following evening? I thought, okay, that's not quite how I remembered it. Simon tells Kappatoo that he saw the events on the histogram as well. The computer advises Kappatoo that this is what Zeta wants before starting to act very strangely and playing random songs. Kappatoo asks the computer if it is okay, and it just replies that it must be something it has picked up. Back in Kappatoo's dome, the computer is still acting strangely. Simon mulls over what Sigma could be doing back in his time and what Zeta's overall plan is. Then wonders when it will be safe for Kappatoo to return. Things get even worse, and the computer starts acting really erratically and seems to have no control over itself. Kappatoo then contacts Simon via the TV and informs Simon that Sigmasix has kidnapped Lucy. As the computer is still behaving strangely, Kappatoo talks Simon through how to run a basic maintenance check on the computer, but Simon does not know how to perform it, and the computer tries to avoid an override command Kappatoo tells Simon to use. As the computer will not cooperate with an override, Simon freezes it and heads off to the studios for an Ultramatch rehearsal. At the Ultramatch studio, Simon says he is a little nervous to the other contestants, and it appears they all are. Zeta and her computer arrive at the rehearsal, and she asks Simon how his computer is, and advises him that computers can contract very nasty viruses. Back at
It
Kappatoo's dome, yeah, a bit gloaty villain, like
I'm gonna say left out a bit because it showed as soon as he left that the computer got back up. He wasn't really frozen.
yes, that's correct. That's correct. Yes. Um, back at Kappatoo's dome, and that was a key part. Back at Kappatoo, although yeah, back at Kappatoo's dome, Kappatoo speaks to his computer about Sigmasix kidnapping Lucy, and his computer advises that he come back to his dome. Once the call has ended, the computer turns and asks Zeta if that was what he wanted him to say, implying it is now under her total control. It's odd that for a program with so much plot in it, it also seems to have quite a bit of padding. Um, I think that's because they don't spend a lot of time on character moments. Um, Sigmasix wakes up with a call from Zeta on his wristband, where she advises him on the next part of her plan. Back at the farm, Brian is showing everyone an article in a book about the same events that happened in the past by a girl possessed by a poltergeist. Although he won't admit it, he finds it strange that Lucy disappears. When she comes back, similar events have happened. No, and when she comes back, similar events have happened. Hazel is unconvinced, but asked everybody to stay around the farm so they know where they are. Later on, Sharon is angry with Lucy as she won't tell her where she has been, and Sharon does not believe the story Kappatoo and Steve told her. Kappatoo and Steve are in the caravan talking about Melanie when Sigmasix uses his wristband to set it rolling down a hill after sealing the door shut. They are both thrown from the caravan and left unhurt, and rush back to the farm to tell Brian. Lucy relents and tells Sharon everything, but Sharon does not believe a word of it and is on the brink of calling her dad to pick her up, when Sigmasix beams into their room and kidnaps Lucy. As Kappatoo and Steve make their way into the kitchen, they don't get a chance to mention the caravan incident, and everybody knows that Sigmasix has kidnapped Lucy. Melanie interrupts them and thinks that Simon and the computer are on a TV program. She informs them that Brian wants to question them in the kitchen about Lucy's disappearance. Sharon tells them all she knows about Lucy's disappearance, including her trip to the future. All Brian seems interested in is whether Simon is who, if he is, as Sharon claims, an alien. Brian runs a full physio on Kappatoo, but can only conclude that he is human, much to Steve's relief. Just then the phone rings and Brian and Hazel know it will be Lucy and Simon's mum. Brian just picks up the receiver and drops it again, not wanting to have to explain that Lucy has vanished again. Kappatoo, not wanting to talk any further, freezes everybody apart from Steve, and the two beam away. As they are looking around the farm trying to find Sigmasix and Lucy, they spot him and her frozen, but he beams away with her before Kappatoo can stop him. Over to you, Jeff.
Well, it's funny because you read, it seemed like it was a longer description of the episode, but actually watching the episode, it felt like less happened in this one than in the previous one. But I think the computer going loony might have worked better if they hadn't made him so loony in his normal state.
Yeah, that's a fair
So,
point.
you know, I've talked about how he's my least favorite part of this, and that's the funny part is he seemed more subdued in this one when in the one he's supposed to be going crazy, because he's normally so weird that it just wasn't that much of a contrast.
Yeah, the humor is just a bit. It's like someone with all the attempted, like we've said before, or what I've said before, that like Robin Williams would have been the right person for that job. In that, it's it like all of the when he does those funny voices, it's almost like they have to be funny, or it's just sort of left out there, and where it falls flat. And for you, it falls flat. For me, there's a little bit of the extra where I can recognize who he's doing. Like at one point he did Kenneth Williams, and then at one point he did Basil from Faulty Towers.
Yeah, see, and that's a show that I know, and I still didn't get that at all. So I don't think he does very good impressions, even of the the few people that I've known that he's doing. So
Yeah,
yeah,
I thought the caravan sequence was well done.
yeah, I guess.
They looked realistic from inside when it was rolling
Yeah,
down. They couldn't have been done much better. Uh, uh, and I liked maybe some of these. I'll just get my thoughts on this board across, and it might spark something in you. So there were a couple of bits that I did laugh out loud a few times, like especially when she said, "Weird, is this Channel 4?" Because Channel 4 did have that reputation in that it was a sort of like it started in the early 80s, and it was like this sort of very left-wing kind of Channel 4 in the 80s. And
see, I found that amusing without even really knowing what that meant. You know, I mean, I knew what it meant in terms of the TV channel, but I don't know anything specific about Channel 4. So
yeah, because people used to say things about Channel 4. like especially sort of more conservative people, I suppose. Um,
I
then
think the funniest line I remember was when they're rolling down and he says to take out Melanie if I don't make it or something. And he says, I can't. I don't have any money.
yeah, I thought that was funny as well. I put that on there at the bottom. I've got no money. So
Yeah.
it's like that actor. It's like Simon Nash, the actor. It's like I think he does comedy quite well. It's with the bits of the drama that he's not quite as good. Um, yeah, and then when like massive video camera by today's standards for like home.
I would say the flaw, though, for him is that in this series, it seems like I don't know, maybe it's part of the idea that they're getting closer to being more like each other, but it seemed like there's less distinction. So I almost have to remind myself every time that he's on which one he's supposed to be in this scene.
Oh, like and
Whereas
also
I didn't used to have to do that. They used to be more
well,
distinct.
oh, and maybe I mean, characters do evolve, or rather, well, humans evolve, and maybe characters should too. I mean, like right at the end, when you had Kappatoo, not Simon, punch the hay at the end. Like when he had the swing and he punched the hay, and they made a big deal in the first series about there being no violence in the future. So yeah. What else? Yeah, the funny line.
So
Oh
is
yeah,
it multiple cows that we're talking, or is it still just the one?
it's just the one. It's just
Okay,
the one.
because I thought I heard different accents, or so I don't know. Maybe it was just
Yeah. You see, like like I said, you got there. So there, as you said about distinguishing between the two, you've got Kappatoo acting like Simon in displaying some violence, even if it's just violence against hay. There was something. I mean, this is made in 1991 and broadcast in about April, May 92. And there is a bit where. There's a bit where. Oh, I'm not there. I mean, look at that tape recorder. I've written here 1974 called Davros Wants His Tape Recorder Back. you know, in Genesis of the Daleks, he's got the secrets on there of the Doctor. Right. Or so-called secrets. Well, not so-called, but his confession, sort of. Right. Yeah. So the bit for me was the bit with the computer was a bit cringy and a little. It's like it sounds like slightly off key. It's like the sort of feeling you get when someone who's singing, who can't really sing, and it's like humor that's a little bit off where it's cringy. That's sort of my feeling I get sometimes with the computer, the way it does his humor, because it is sort of like hard to explain. Any other thoughts, Jeff?
Is the song "I'm Too Sexy" like still? I wouldn't say still popular, but is it still remembered pretty well in Britain?
Yeah, I mean, because comedically it can be used in certain situations. I think it would be of people of our generation, they would remember it and like Right Said Fred, because it is such a distinctive song.
Yeah. Well, I was just curious because I remember it very well, of course, but I had two whatever you call it stints with that song because I used to listen to a radio show called UK Chart Attack, and so I would hear the songs that were popular in Britain before they came to America. So I heard that song then, and it was like the number one song of the year in '91 in Britain. but then it hit America in early 92. So it was like the second wave where it became popular again. But I would say in America, probably the average person on the street wouldn't even remember it. Like, it was such a blip on the radar screen, one of those, not just one hit wonders for the act, but it was like the song just rose and fell so fast that I would think that, I don't know, maybe more people than I think that I believe would know it. But it just seems like one of those things that, like, there's a scene in Futurama where Fry listens to the song "Baby Got Back" by Sir Mix-a-Lot, which was the same year, 92. And Leela has the line about, you can't just sit here listening to classical music because it's supposed to be set, obviously way in the future. That one, I think probably more people would remember in the future, but that's just in America anyway. But that's just a guess. I really don't know.
And they did the same joke on this, like when they played some music with the grannies, and then one of them says, "Oh, I love classical music."
Yeah. It's a good joke.
Yeah, and it's probably been done before Kappatoo as well.
Yeah, it works because people associate a certain type of sound as being a classical music rather than a time period.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
As Professor Jonathan Miller would say, a rehearsal of categories. So he had a theory of humor about sort of like putting things into new categories, and it's very NTP-ish. Because not one theory fits all kinds of humor.
Yeah, it reminds me of a show that I can't even remember the name of, but they, it was, from the 80s when rap music was, still considered very much a novelty to a lot of people. And there was the kids are listening to the rap song, and the grandmother makes some comment about listening to your cowboy. She calls it like cowboy talk song or something like that, because to her that was like the closest association she had was like, old, like, songs where they would like talk instead of sing, and a lot of them were like, cowboy ballad type things. So that's the association, but it was a funny thing to have recall it that. So anyway,
so Jeff, if you were directing this, first of all, good on you for doing it at 14. Good on you for doing it at 14 years old. 14, 15, 16.
Yeah, well, it's easy for me to say now that I would tell the computer guy to tone it down. I'm not sure at 14, 15 what I would have done. But
like, say the
okay, actually, I can say that at that age, I probably would have had all the female characters in much more revealing outfits. That would have been, this guy probably would have been in a completely different outfit.
Yeah. Well,
like I would have been like, we don't need to have bubble wrap packaging as the top of his shirt, or not bubble wrap. What is that, like? It's like a foam. Like, I'm trying to think what that's used for. Like the insulation type stuff, maybe. I don't know, that foam stuff.
And sometimes you do get it in packaging, but so there's a little thing. I've sort of brought this up a little bit before. And I last watched this in February, and then before then when it was actually on air. So at the time of broadcast, the first broadcast. What I would be interested to know if you would have asked the actor Simon Nash to differentiate Kappatoo and Simon more, or whether that might be an issue in that the audience might ask, oh, the people that know him are going to notice that, like say you had him with a different body language, walking in a different way.
Well, I thought in the first season they did a good job of that, because he was different enough, but it was still subtle that he could pass off, because the expectation, like psychologically, of people is they see somebody they know, it's that person. They're not. There's no reason other people have to think that it's someone else. So little differences are not going to phase most people. Most of the time in the first season, they would just be like, "Oh, Simon's acting weird." Well, he's a teenager, and they go through phases and do different things. So that in itself isn't unusual. So, but you could still tell the difference between the two in terms of, you pointed out, because you talked about what you viewed as their personality type difference, and even if it wasn't pronounced enough to necessarily see them as completely different types, there were somewhat different in the personalities, enough that you could, when one was on screen, one of the characters on screen, you could still tell, it's this guy. He was different enough. And it seems like in the second season, either he stopped caring about that as an actor, or the director didn't, they didn't care to emphasize it as much. And so it makes those scenes a little bit more like I have to remind myself every time, though, that they're switched again, especially because there's been more kind of going back and forth.
Yeah.
In the first season, it was like they switched and then they were there for a while. So it was pretty easy to know, okay, both of them are pretending to be the other one. But in this, they've had some stuff. They've had some confusing things because they've gone back and forth from the future to the present or whatever, more than once.
I think they changed the director. I think it was Tony Kish for most of the episodes, if not all, in the first season. I've not seen his name come up in this second series. Tony Kish. I think it's like KYSH. And we can say that as far as their personality types, we can at least say that the two characters have, you could say that Simon has concrete interests, like being interested in sport and physical activities, and that whether it's personality type or whether it's upbringing, Kappatoo's interests were more abstract or more scientific.
And in this season, there's been less of that distinction because the plot has sort of, you said, there's less character moments, and more plot. So in the scenarios that they've been in, there's been less reason for them to show distinct personalities. It's just sort of been like, here's what we have to do now.
Yeah,
so it's been much more pragmatic.
So you can see what's happening in this series, where you've got a build-up of, it's just my thing, it's just my pet theory that serials in science fiction, like the ideas sort of build up on each other, and I think it's harder for an audience to keep up with that than it is for something that's more based in the here and now in terms of continuity.
I didn't quite get the part either when they were examining Kappatoo as Simon, and Steve is like trying to get him to use his watch. I mean, assuming that's what he was trying to do.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure why he didn't do that sooner. Like, it didn't seem like it would have taken that much effort. But I don't know.
Yeah,
unless he just wanted him to do whatever test and confirm he was human just so that they could get that over with. I don't know.
Yeah, that was a bit like, I think a little bit more character for, but that's the issue that you get, where it's like the show is about Kappatoo and Simon, then how much interest do you give to the other cats? I mean, you can see now by comparison, they put a little bit more effort into Tracy Cotton's character than they have into Melanie so far. And and it's not that they wrote brilliantly for Tracy Cotton, but they did add these little things, didn't they? But they've not. I mean, we've had 5 episodes so far, and they've not really added that much to Melanie's character. They've done some
they seem to have sacrificed that for having the more constant action. And as I pointed out, I think last week, some of that is a bit convoluted.
Yes.
Whereas the first season seemed to flow a little more naturally.
Yeah, there's definitely more. It's this sort of like building on the continuity of the first season. So it probably gets a little bit like this in that, well, there's all the first season stuff. We don't really want to repeat that, but we want to be continuity with that. And so it sort of like builds up on itself.
Seeing these pictures too of this scene made me think also that the I don't know if they do the same thing in TV, but in theater where they call blocking.
Yeah.
The blocking seems off, or at least they don't seem to care as much about it. It's like the characters are placed in kind of awkward positions.
So it's too much frontality, like when you're on a stage.
Yeah,
Like,
it just seems less natural. That's a
yeah,
like, and it seemed like I never, if I noticed that, well, then there's an issue with it. I know that sounds kind of redundant, like, but if I normally, if I'm just seeing something and characters seem to move naturally, then I don't notice it because it's just people acting naturally. So when there's scenes where it's like it looks like there's actors who are standing there not knowing what to do, that's
yeah,
when I notice it.
but I would say though, I would give them some like plausible deniability for that, or a reasoning for that, in that they could say, well, when they're in the program, they've got the frontality of the fact that there's literally an audience in front of them, and maybe they're standing as they would stand when they're on the program, and they're sort of like getting into the mode of, well, I'm going to stand like
Yeah,
this because I'm going to
but
be
things
like
like,
that
I
when
mean,
we do
this
the
the
program.
picture that you have up right now. I'm like, if the focus of this scene is supposed to be on the conversation between Zeta and Simon, and
Yeah,
yet the way this is blocked, we've got this guy up here at the front who's taking up too much space. You know what I'm saying? Like the front guy is the way they've got this pictured. It's like he's taking the focus away. So it's like, why we have him even there? I mean, what's his purpose for even being there in this? Like, so you could say it's the camera shot. Like maybe they should have shot it from the other side. But either way, it's just awkward looking.
yeah, it all depends on how long, like, uh if
And
I
that's
then
it's the kind of thing that,
if it wasn't an issue, I would play the bit and we could talk about it.
yeah.
But um,
I would say, I mean, obviously, I'm sitting here looking at a still picture enough to nitpick it, whereas when the actual scene is happening, it's not, that long. But I still did notice it.
yeah, I mean,
Then these scenes, it just seemed like the actors didn't know what to do,
right, okay.
or at least didn't seem natural. It almost seemed like a rehearsal where
I'll
they
tell
just
you what.
didn't quite get down where they were supposed to be on the stage.
I tell you what. I might risk it and try and show that bit that we were talking about. If I take the sound off and try and find the bit that you're talking about. So now we're talking about blocking, folks. And I've been reading about blocking in cinematic motion, but as Jeff says, for the stage, I'm going to try and get the bit where they. I mean, where did they turn? Ah, there we go.
And even
Right,
the
so here
scenes
we go.
in the farmhouse, like I don't know if it's just they had such little room to work with.
Jeff, can you see this?
Yeah.
Right, so here we go. Playing it. We'll actually look at the blocking live. So look over there. So let's see how long that shot is where he's in the foreground. I mean, it's not that. It's just a little bit of staging in depth.
Yeah, I just think I would have put him in those positions. I don't know. You asked me of what I would do as a director, and I just that's the thing that springs to mind is that we shouldn't even have. Uh, Honestly, I'm not even sure I would have had the other contestants on the stage. Like they don't provide anything. I mean, maybe the one that he's talking to, but we don't even really need the other ones. It just seems like
Yeah,
you said.
he's also stood in an awkward way as well.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I mean, it's just he just didn't seem very natural. He just sort of seems like I'm standing here in this kind of unnatural thing, and I'm kind of in a position that makes me more prominent than I really should be. And I'm not dissing the actor, like, as saying, oh, he's useless, fire him or anything. I'm just saying that I'm more blaming the director for the way that the camera shot is and the way that they're placed in the scene.
Yeah.
But
So
it's not just this particular one. It's also like when you were going through it to get to this part, and we were looking at the farmhouse scenes. I don't know if it was just that it's very small set, but it seems like they're in too close. Like,
that looks like, I think that's an interior location. By the sound of it, it sounded like it was that this is a real interior location.
real house. Okay,
Yeah,
so it's like
based on the sound.
it just seems like maybe the cameras are just too close to them. Maybe they just didn't have room for the cameras. I don't know.
Oh yeah, I mean, I've been reading about that. Yeah, I mean, you can get that where you can try and shorten the length to make the lens a little bit wider, but yeah, there's not a lot of room in that.
I don't know. It just once again reminds me of how good Homicide was in so many elements, including the camera work, because they had the handheld cameras that they took in all of those real places in Baltimore, and it always just seemed like it it was in the right place. Like,
Oh,
it did such a good job with it.
also in those that we know from like television technology and how it's changed, like the cameras were a lot bigger in the past, especially like the video television cameras, and like the film cameras got a lot smaller by comparison, which is why one of the reasons why Doctor Who would do a lot of its outside stuff on film.
Yeah, right.
As for the Homicide, there's actually I actually have a bit of a interview in this book that you might be interested in, because this guy Alan DeVow, or whatever he's called, the cinematographer, he worked with Barry Levinson, and he was talking that Barry Levinson liked to use multi-camera, and he was talking and I get the impression that Barry Levinson was very much an actors and actresses director, and that he cared more about the acting than fancy camera work. But
Yeah.
that said, very good lighting in Homicide: Life on the Street, and you got a couple of characters in there with very dark skin in Giardella and Frank Pembleton, and you can see everything in their face, even at night.
Yeah, well, I think when we did the Homicide review, just talked about how they brightened it over time. If you look at the first season episodes versus the final season, there's a huge difference in the amount of light. It was darker and grainier at the beginning. And that was one of the many things the network told them to change.
Yeah, but even in the car scenes at night, it was just like brilliantly lit, where everything else would
Mhm.
be dark, but there'd be enough light on their face.
Right.
Just very well done. Anyhow, enough of that. I don't know if that's going to get me into trouble, but yeah, that blocking with it's just that man, sort of like boy or whatever, awkwardly positioned, that teen, let's say.
Yeah, it's not it's not some huge thing where I'm like, oh, the episode's ruined because of this or anything. It's just a kind of thing if I'm nitpicking, where because you asked me like if I was a director, like that kind of thing. I just would have said, just we got to shoot this a different way, or move people around or something, and just it wouldn't have been some, I wouldn't have had a fit about it like the game show host guy does in the scene where he storms out of it. I just be like, we got to fix this real quick. We'll make it better than this.
I mean, like he has, like especially the way, like where you see him walking there, like the Simon Nash walks in a very, how can I put this? He walks in a very well, let's just say he doesn't walk like an INTP. He walks, he walks with a bit of a swagger, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
He walks in a way like he walks like someone who has a little bit of presence in the way he walks. Like he doesn't look like a shy, retiring type in the way he walks.
Mm-hmm.
And then you've got Kappatoo walking in the same way. And I'm thinking, no, Kappatoo wouldn't walk like that. They don't hardly walk in the future. And
Yeah, I mean, he still has confidence, but he probably would be a little bit different. Yeah, especially in this environment where he's really not as familiar with it. I mean, he was already unfamiliar with things when he was in the city and the school and stuff, and this is like a out in the country farm thing, so it's even less familiar to him.
yeah, so it's like he walks like, dare I say it, an ESTP. Yes, that like with that confidence, that sort, like sort of thing that you might expect from Kellerman, where there's that little bit of a swagger in the way they walk. Yeah. Or right then, so I will get back to that. So it's a peculiar episode to me in that there were good things in it. There's a lot of stuff that's in it that's going to get paid off later, like as you can imagine with the camera, with the light being on, showing it's recording.
Mm-hmm.
And also the thing going on with him, with the computer. And so there are these sort of like ongoing plots. I was a little bit disappointed. Some of the performances were a little bit off in this episode. Like, and especially the actress playing Lucy, what is it, Nina Muskulich, wasn't quite as good as in the previous episode. It's like she wasn't quite feeling it.
Yeah, she didn't get as much to do. Yeah, her scenes with Sharon, that was another, I guess, thing that I noticed. Again, not a huge thing. It didn't make the episode bad or anything, but it just, yeah, their interaction and Sharon in general, like, didn't seem to have the kind of spirit that she had before. So maybe it was just a bad day for everybody.
Yeah, I mean that can happen. I mean, you've probably been on that, Jeff. Like when you've been on stage, has that happened where there's just like a bad atmosphere?
Oh, sure,
and it brings everyone down.
And also the opposite has happened where there's been a show that I was amazed at how well we pulled it off, considering all of the behind the scenes stuff that was going on.
Yeah, I mean, I was in a school play. The dress rehearsal was terrible, but when we did it, we were good. I think we had 4 performances, but one night, right, I think the first 2 nights, like loads of laughs. Like there was just one night where we were doing it the same as we did night before. No laughs, and the audience was just not feeling it.
Yeah, I mean, with live theater, obviously you can never account for, especially in comedy, with how the audience is going to be when it's a show that that depends on getting some audience reaction, and you don't get any. It does make it more difficult. But you just have to follow the example of Norm Macdonald, the comedian on Weekend Update, Saturday Night Live, because he actually said that sometimes he was even more amused at a joke when it didn't get a laugh than he was when it did. He would kind of milk it and just sit there and wait, and that was, people would start laughing because he was just sitting there waiting.
Right. Yeah. Also,
there are little bits, like my younger brother was in a show in community theater where they had all kinds of problems from the beginning with not having enough actors to even fill all the roles, and so the people came in late, didn't know their lines. There was a lot of issues with that, and so they had a really rough opening night. But I saw that not only had things improved by the final show, but there were sort of little flourishes they did, and he had a scene where he was supposed to do something where the other character didn't see it, and the other actor came back too fast, so he had to get rid of what he had in his hand really fast. So he did this slightly over the top comedic thing of putting it behind his back, and it got a huge laugh because of the way he did it.
Yeah, I remember, like, in hindsight, the character I played in the school play, Maxim, it was Hotel Paradiso. In hindsight, I looked at the character because, like, I kept the playbook. They let you keep the playbook. Flipping INTP. Because the directors at the school, the 2 teachers that did it, they'd done like 25 years worth of productions before then. So, and looking back to how they directed us, it was just like directing by stealth. So all of that experience, like 25 years worth of experience of directing kids in school plays. And it's like they got the performances out of us that they did. So much so that when I actually saw the film Hotel Paradiso with Alec Guinness in it, I thought, this is rubbish compared to what we did. Because we had
I felt a little bit about like that about Tom Jones, because I was in a stage production of Tom Jones in my junior year of high school, and then we watched the movie after we did the play, and we were like, man, we did a much better job than they did.
Yeah.
We were much funnier.
Yeah. You can just get that with just where everyone lifts everybody else. And that was a big help for me, the fact that it seemed that everybody else was so real.
And of course, we did add one little bit that wasn't in the script when, in Tom Jones is the big scene. I won't try to explain the plot, but there's a scene where everybody at the same time exclaims, "Jenny Jones!" And when we did it in rehearsal, one of the actors and my friend, when we did that, immediately said, "Don't." Like the Homer Simpson thing. And so people laughed at it so much, we decided to do it on stage. So after she said it, then everybody did that. So
right, okay.
Anyway.
Right. I don't know what to give this 1 out of 10. I'm going to give it a default. There were some funny I think the stuff with the computer take a point off for that, for like a little bit cringy, but I'm going to give it 7 out of 10.
I'll say 6, but it's like right on the borderline. It's like a high 6. So it's just, I gave the one last week a 7, and this wasn't quite as good. So it's, I'm just knocking it down a little bit. Yeah, the computer thing, just a bunch of little bits. There's nothing like huge that was wrong with it or anything. It's just, not quite up to snuff. So hopefully it picks back up a little bit next week.
Yeah, and I would just say that maybe in their defense, they did not have a big budget on for children's.
Yeah. I think they're doing a great job with what they've been provided. It's just maybe the choice of doing the farmhouse thing had made them. It makes the outside scenes a little more interesting, but the inside stuff is a little bit harder.
Yeah, because there's fewer options. Because in that first series, there were a lot of options for things they could do with the school and other people. And this, it's like, it's just that family. Mm-hmm. But then again, what I might say, though, is, yes, I'll give you that, people. But if you're going to just have this farm location, why don't you actually spend a little bit more time in putting some character into the uncle and the aunt and into Melanie?
Yeah, I'm sure the real farmers are watching, going, "Man, these guys wouldn't stay in business for any time."
Yeah, and I know that like Uncle Alan or whatever he's called. I don't even know his name. I think that tells you it. Like he should, and the actor's quite good in like. So they could have been a bit further with the NF-ness.
The only reason I remember that the wife is Hazel is because you read the name in the description of the plot.
Yeah. What's he called? Uncle what? What's he? Uncle NF. Uncle Idealist. Uncle Idealist. Uncle, or at least ENP. Uncle ENP. Uncle EMP could have been given a little bit more counts, like in the first episode of season 2.
And
like when he mentioned
the computer whose name is Psycho is less psycho than the other computer.
Yeah, I mean, I think he does well with the part that he has. Like, that guy, like over the top. Right then. So to recount, I give it 7, and Jeff gives it a high 6.
Okay.
So I'll stop the broadcast.
See you next week for time something else.
Yes, time something else.